Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. This is Comprehensivist Wednesdays that we do in collaboration with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. Today is the fifth Wednesday. And what I wanted to do today was to build on something that we started in the last meetup in the CJ series. And we went through, that was my absolute favorite presentation by CJ on the great human traditions of inquiry and action. And he kind of indicated that there is a third thing, which is like, I call it expression. He called it experience. So kind of artistic angle to this. And this is the diagram that I've come up with. I've been thinking a lot of kind of like Trinitarian issues where, you have kind of the mind, body, and your heart kind of coming together. And this is a way of presenting that. And I would like to discuss this with you. All right. So, all right, let me get started. Okay. So at a very large level, what I'm saying is that everything is very powerful if you think of it in a Trinitarian way. Like, for example, let's look at it, like when you're thinking of yourself, you need to have an ideal at which you're aiming. And you also have to realize that you're not the only one who has that. You're actually living in a society, you're going back and forth in a society. And whatever you're seeing so there is a dance between you and society, which is mediated by the ideal that both of you have in common. This is true even at a conversation level. When I'm talking to you, I'm assuming that we have some common ideal, some common set of values, some common North Star towards which both of us are going. And that's what makes conversation possible. So even the conversation between two people, instead of society, you can say other. So individual, you and other is always mediated by an ideal. And so let's focus for a moment on the ideal, because that is the key. Like in the modern world, I think we have lost, like the way in which C.S. Lewis puts it, is we have lost the Tao. We have lost the idea that there is an ideal, idea that there is universal principles. And then it is all fragmented because there is nothing that is holding you and others together. You're kind of splintered into these million groups that are warring against one another. Ideal is something, a common ideal is something that brings one together. So the idea of one from many requires an ideal towards which each person is going. So that is the overall picture. So on one side, there is the ideal. And this is the most important thing because that's bringing everything together. And then there is you. You look at yourself, and then you can't really make progress towards the ideal because, you are using all the traditions, even the words that I'm speaking have a history to them. Ideas that I'm speaking have history to them. The stuff that I have, the fact that we are talking on the internet, which has been made by others. Okay, so that is the context in which society is the context in which individuals operate. And we operate with a common ideal. So that is the three-part division at a large level. And folks, keep notes of questions that you have or comments that you have. We'll start with questions because I want to really I want to make sure that whatever I'm saying is clear. So where to start? Let's start with the ideal. And here I can frame the ideal in multiple ways. This is this I borrowed directly from CJ. There is the ideal of inquiry traditions. You're taking in all the inquiry traditions. You're taking in all the actions in the world. And then there are all the expression traditions. So you can say that these are artistic traditions. These ones are kind of scientific or philosophical traditions of inquiry. And these action traditions are those of engineering, design, social structures, law, business organizations, all of them are here, okay? So those are the three kinds. But as the question that Jeannie had asked, are past traditions the only thing? Can you come up with new traditions? And there was this beautiful poem by Bertrand Peraley called Opportunities, which basically says, these are just starting points. These past, learning of past, you're doing as a starting point because you're trying to start with as high a base as possible. And then from there, you have to build your own traditions. And in some sense, we are doing that in the 52 Living Ideas. We are basing ourselves on different traditions, but we are building our own tradition, which is appropriate to this medium. Back then in the Gurukuls of India, or the teachings of Lao Tzu and his students, or Aristotle's peripatetic school, they didn't have Zoom. They couldn't have people coming from everywhere, just talking to each other. So we have to figure out how to do that. So all traditions are, you're learning from traditions in order to build new traditions, new ideals, new ideals based on that. But the important thing of the traditions here is that you're trying to take in all of them, synthesize them, compare them, come up with saying, okay, I think that these are the proper ideals to have. And then that serves as a base. Now, let's look at us as individuals. We have capacity to understand. So that's our mind. We have a capacity to love. That's our heart. And we have capacity to work. That's our body. And we are this Trinitarian creature. And all the traditions, and this is all inspired by the scribal works that we have studied, Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, and the Gospel of John. And there, the individual is an integrated being. There is no such thing as just, oh, I just have this idea, I'm just going to throw it around. No, you're putting your life behind it. You're putting your heart behind it. Otherwise, throw away the idea. You can't just have kind of random emotions. How does it comport with all the core ideas that you believe in? You can't just have random actions. It has to comport with your love of the ideal. This is love of the ideal. So this love is love of the ideal. The understanding is understanding of the creative principle, or understanding principle itself. In Gospel of John, they would call it logos, which is the creating principle. The works. And all of these three things have to come together to make an integrated human being. So that is about this. Now let's talk about this one. This is something that I understand the least of. And I discussed this in preparation for this. I discussed this with Maritza, and Maritza convinced me to change two of these. And I'm still not sure that these are, because that's the most difficult thing to understand. What is collaboration? What is a society? And how does it interface on one hand with individuals? And how does it interface with the ideal? And here, the best descriptions I have here, and I'm open to suggestions on all of these things. Have we named this correctly? Should they be named differently? Does this way of thinking, this kind of Trinitarian way of thinking, what are the uses of it? What do you think of it? How useful is it? So here you have community values. It's the ideas that are holding us together. The things that we believe in, things that we think are good, that serves as a base for us to interact, in the sense that this is a little version of this ideal in a community. So that's why it's the same color. Okay. And then in the society, there is physical organization. This is the best understood. We focus a lot on this. These are the roads, these are the schedules of the meetups. These are the ways of, announcing things, format of running the meetups, all of that. So it's both organizations in space and time. And then this is fellowship. There is each organization has a sense of life, undertone of emotion that is supporting the individuals within it. So you can think of this as a family. It is the love that the family members have for each other. The fellowship is the best word that we have currently for it. And all these three interact with one another in a dynamic way to actually show us whatever it is that we see. So whenever we are seeing the world, or whenever we are seeing this meetup, whenever we are seeing a country, we are seeing a bunch of individuals. We're seeing a bunch of societies. It's not one society. This is all distributed. There are different clubs, there are different institutions, there are so like a set of institutions here, and there are different ideals that all of them are working towards. So this is my best understanding of how to think about the project that we are doing, or at life as such. So this is my summary of that. So would love to first hear any comments or questions on this model itself. What do you think? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you would like to make a comment. I'm a big fan of diagrams, so I've done all kinds of diagrams in the past. And Maritza was reminding me that I keep coming up new diagrams. These have been different versions of it. So what do you think of this one? Let's start with Rupali. Rupali, glad to see you. Go ahead.
Hi, Shrikant. This is a very beautiful diagram. It reminds me of a clover, and it has a vibrancy to it because of its colors, the combination of the secondary colors with the primary yellow color. Also, there seems to be like a movement to it with the alternating patterns of green and yellow, or juxtapositions of those. And because you have the smaller triangle inside, that becomes a bigger triangle, and it's almost like a flowering of an unfolding or unfurling of a flower. So I feel like there's life in this diagram. So that's my very first impression of your diagram. Thank you for sharing it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Rupali. And if you have more comments, you can go ahead and type an exclamation mark and come back. Joe, what do you think?
No, I mean, I think your diagrams are always very deep and well done. So, I mean, from that perspective, well done. I think it captures quite a bit. I think that where it becomes interesting is what's one layer deeper than that, meaning, so this is at a meta level. And then how is it that we then understand, like, what's the process itself for understanding?
So what I would say, I would give a flippant answer to that.
Sure.
It's like somebody was saying that the world is held up by turtles. And they say, okay, what's under the turtle? What is holding? Oh, it's another turtle. And so it's turtles all the way. So this is like a fractal diagram. You can see that it's like a 3-part here. And then that is also divided into 3-part. You can take each of these things and further divide them. And what that does is that it allows you to see, because what happens is that, let's say there is an organization that you have designed. You can still use this 3-part three-part division to see, okay, how is this organization really working? What about it is creating the fellowship? What about it really supports the community value? So it is possible to kind of go that, and then you can take the community values that you saw in this organization. So it will be something like a purple here. And you see, okay, what exactly about these community values is making fellowship possible? What exactly about these community values is being reflected in the structure? So you can go deeper using this in a fractal sense. I don't know if that answers it.
No, I mean, as I said, I think that at a principle level, it captures quite a bit. I mean, I think that now the idea is to look internal to the actor itself.
So the
So
way,
then
the way in which this diagram does it, Joe,
Okay.
is that at principle level is this.
Correct.
So say at principle level it captures it. That means it has captured the ideal correctly. So when you want to say how does the actor do it, then you look at this part. And it's also reminding you that you can't just look at the actor. You have to look at actor in the context of the society, the community in which the actor is acting. So that is how it goes in that direction.
No, I mean, no, Shrikant, as I said, it is a very clear diagram, and it makes a lot of sense. It's the idea of what is the actor's judgment? What is the ideal that is being refined? What is being refined there? So you as an individual, I have fellowship, I have works, I have love, I have expression, I have actions, I have organization. But what is then being refined?
Sure. Let me go ahead and answer that. So let's take the first part that you've said. The thing is, it put one thing on the table so I can deal with. So first, when you said, how is the understanding of the person being refined? So what is going on is that there is, so this part, that is this part, right? You're asking about this. So firstly, you have to always map it. The beautiful thing about this diagram is that it allows you to map the sentences that you're asking or questions that you're asking into the diagram. You're saying, this is what you're talking about. Now you're saying, how is it refined? Okay, that's a beautiful question. Okay, the thing is that ask one question at a time so you can answer it. Otherwise, it becomes like a set of unanswerable questions because it's just too many things. I'm unable to handle it. My mind can't handle it. So any one question I can answer one at a time.
I appreciate that.
So the understanding. So now let's look at the refining. Okay, how does refining take place? Refining is taking place by this loop. So other thing I wanted to point out, you can see my pointer, right? So the way the diagram works is that it is always going like this. It goes through like this, like this, like this. Okay, it keeps going like this, like this. So it can pick up any one of these in anything, but it always has to cover all three at once. And the refining is being done by these loops. This is not a static diagram. There is this loop. So for example, your understanding, so you have an understanding at a particular point of time, okay? You act on that understanding. So you're acting here in the world. Okay, you're using your understanding to act here in the world. You're getting a lot of feedback from that. And then you're going up into saying, okay, how does it connect with the highest art that I have seen? Okay, so you're basically doing these loops again and again. And then you come back, learn everything from it to refine your understanding. Next time you take your understanding, so these are just infinite looping that is going on. You take this understanding and then you say, let me look at all the action traditions. What can I learn from them? So now you're taking your understanding and going to the ideal, going to knowledge itself and saying, what can I learn about that? You take that and then say, okay, now let me present it to my community. Okay, and let's see the emotional reactions of them, the fellowship. You take that in and you refine your understanding. So you keep doing these loops and you never stop because this is infinite. See, the thing about it is that it is infinite. What you're dealing with reality itself. You're dealing with being itself. You're dealing with a human being that has this infinite capacity. So you keep refining things this way. Let me take other people's questions and let me come back to it. Please keep coming up with questions one at a time.
Sure, I have a few more, but just
Sure.
really briefly, what I think that what you've captured in many ways is the idea that we've talked about here in the past, the idea of the unity of virtues. In other words, this is a unity, right? And that this is not one can be done in a vacuum.
Right.
So this is the
so let me address that. So the
sure.
concept of virtue that this diagram holds is very dramatically different than that of traditions, because there the way in which this one holds virtue.
I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I misspoke. The idea that you said they're all being done in unison.
Yes.
The same idea holds with virtue.
Exactly. I mean, the thing, let me put it this way. What happens is that when you take an idea like virtue, there are multiple traditions behind that idea. So you can think of virtue in the Platonic tradition. You can think of virtue in the modern tradition. You can think of virtue in a subjectivist tradition. And their meaning of the word virtue is going to be different.
Sure.
This diagram is offering is a particular view of everything, including virtue. What is virtue? It is goodness. That is basically about this part. Okay, it is about, and it is saying that goodness has to appeal to the mind, it has to be effective in the world, and it has to speak to your heart. And it is unending. It is an unending process. The same thing that you're talking about, refinement, you have to keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. In this, so it is the virtue is actually this loop. That is the heart of virtue, of your commitment to your ideal, your commitment to your own conscience, which is here, your own commitment to your love of the ideal, your own commitment to making your work as good as possible, your commitment to the community values that you're building, your commitment to building the organization which will help not just you, but everybody else, your commitment to increasing the fellowship of those organizations, your commitment in understanding and building on the traditions of inquiry, your commitment to building the traditions of expression, your commitment to understanding and building. So all of it. So this loop running through all of it is virtue. So it's a much more simpler way of thinking about virtue because it is a simple loop, but it runs through everything. So it's a much more simpler way of thinking about virtue than has been done in most traditions.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to just imply that I was only speaking about virtue. It's just something that is not done in a vacuum.
Sure.
And that gets back to the idea of having a fragmented perspective on the world versus actually having a comprehensive perspective on the world that actually feeds it into a loop.
Exactly. So
that's the.
Go ahead.
No. I mean, I think that's what it's capturing is comprehensivity.
Exactly. Good, very good point. What happens is that all fragmentation falls off this. You say, okay, I'm really focused on what I'm doing. I don't care about anything else. Or I just focus on my own understanding. These are my ideas. I'm actually not going to listen. You may pretend to listen to it, but you will not actually care. This is something that really, I'm passionate about. That's all I'm going to focus on. You're doing it in a reactive way, apart from the world, apart from what you think is the best thing possible. Thank you, Joe. Great questions. Please keep them coming. Next up is going to be Jyoti, followed by Jeannie. Jyoti.
Oops. Thank you for presenting this a wonderful, expression, I guess, of I don't know what you want to call it, like the whole thing together. I'm a little bit confused about the choice of word ideal.
Mhm.
Like comprehensibility, I can understand, and you as an individual collaboration as being part of a society. But what, like, ideal kind of goes into hierarchy to me, and like, who's determining what is ideal?
Sure, that's a good question. Now, this is, it is coming from a certain view of ideals, where, the thing is, this diagram actually is based on certain deeper philosophical premises. Like, again, we're coming back to C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis says that, we had the Tao. Tao is simply kind of the universal ideal. And we have lost it, like Nietzsche said, God is dead. Like the way in which kind of people like Newton dealt with things was to say, okay, there is nature, which is what it is, and that is what I'm trying to grasp. So there is something universal, and that's what the ideal is trying to aim at. So if you want to see what the ideal is, the best thing is to read Tao Te Ching, to see what are they saying about the Tao. You read Bhagavad Gita, you see what are they saying about the ideal. You read Gospel of John. So it is a concept which has been abstracted from such works. And what happens is that in the modern context, what has happened is modern context is basically fragmented, where this here, the love for the ideal, this is basically love, not just love, but love for the ideal. Now here, basically, the modern culture is subjectivist and it is materialistic. So it is subjectivist in the sense that whatever people feel, they think that they like, that they regard as the ideal. So they have really lost this entire part. So what you're asking is absolutely a great question, because that is really the problem, that the modern world has lost ideals, idea of kind of truth. They would say, what is truth? Or truth, or goodness, what is good? It is relative. Or beauty, they would say, oh, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So they're basically questioning the existence of this entire thing completely. They said traditions, oh, those are just random things that people did, but why should you really care about that? So I'm coming from a very different perspective, but thank you for highlighting that. Go ahead.
May I just follow up a little bit?
Sure.
So, I mean, you're mentioning the 3 texts. However, there are other texts too. And I mean, I can understand the desire for, universality. That's basically, as an artist, you struggle with that.
How do you understand the desire for universality? What is it?
Well, desire for universe. So as human beings, there's something that we want to classify as universal, as in every human experiences that. And then there's the individual, as in every human experiences that in a different way, depending on context, perspective, that kind of, like, everybody can feel touch. However, what touch means to each person is different. So I guess the idea of ideal just strikes me in kind of it doesn't, it just strikes me in an abrasive way,
Sure,
as in,
sure. I understand. Let me
and
go ahead.
maybe that's because, you know, I'm coming from the modern point of
Exactly.
view that
Exactly.
uh
Exactly.
of
I grant you, you're in the majority. Okay.
no,
So,
but
okay. Let me go ahead and address it though.
Mhm.
So this is absolutely true that like moderns, really have problems with the ideal. They have problem with universals. They're saying, but each person has their experience. And the solution that this is offering is this part, that it's not just about you. So it's like, the modern world is dualistic. Okay, it is saying either it's your own emotions or it is some truth. Some truth, they will say, okay, it's like, basically Descartes kind of split the world into two parts. It's mind and body. Never the twain shall meet. And all kinds of divisions were, came to be. Not just him, but many other people. He's just one very good example of it. Now, answering the more proximate issue that you brought up, that each person approaches truth, approaches reality in their own way. So how do we know? So the one solution to that is that of the multiple perspectives that you keep on integrating. You don't just say, oh, this is what I feel like, and that's it. What you do is that you put it to action, put it to test. You talk to other people about it. You listen to what they feel. You take in all their input. You study all the traditions of all the cultures you possibly can. And you use that massive amount of work in order to correct your own biases. And that is a tremendous amount of work. That it's the same feedback loop that I was talking about. And what happens is that you will never reach the ideal. You're not the universal, but you're going towards the universal. You're trying to understand the creative forces that are running through life, through people, and you're trying to understand them. And you're trying to understand them not as separated from them, but as a being that is participating in it. And not just you participating in it, but realizing that everybody else is doing that too. And interacting with that, you move towards the ideal. Another way of putting it, there is the infinite and the finite. How does the finite operate in the face of the infinite? Well, you keep moving towards it. You embrace as much as you can, and you keep on moving towards the ideal. And that's the ideal, the truth, beauty, goodness is the thing towards which, it's the final cause towards which you are moving through all these means that you have. And not only using all these three parts together, so not just your intellect, but also implementing your ideas in your action and seeing the results, testing the results, checking your intuitions and feelings about it and using them back, not just relying on intuitions, but systematically trying to bring together not just your understanding, but that of your collaborators and of all the traditions. It gives you a much more robust base. Next up is going to be Jeannie, Maritza, and Joe. Jeannie, go ahead. And folks, you can come back and ask questions. Go ahead, Jeannie.
I might add as a couple of different possibilities for ideal. Bucky's Fuller was to make the world work for 100% of humanity. And that's a good one. And then CJ's really was to solve humanity's problems. And I thought that's another good ideal sort of to make it all work. But I really love the loop. So you have one person that maybe understands and they begin to affect their community. And not everybody that's going to do some action, like maybe I'd be composting and then I'd sort of start other people composting. They may not understand the basics behind it or what it's doing or anything like that. And eventually that sort of swoops up and becomes part of a tradition. so that everybody's composting, and you don't have to understand it really, because many of our traditions, we all take it for granted. I mean, take language as an example. You know, you don't have the understanding of the traditions that you're practicing when you're a child, but later on you may have some understanding back onto the tradition that you were practicing and begun to understand that it was not the right thing. And another example possibly of a tradition changing is this guy went out and shot down a rare swan in front of all these people. And, you know, then he hides the thing and he claims he thought it was some other, you know, a duck or something. But, you know, it used to be absolutely acceptable for somebody to go out and shoot a swan. And bit by bit, with community pressure and an understanding that these things are very rare and swans mate for life, and you know, that to the swan itself this is an absolute, you know, the survivor, this is a tragedy. And bit by bit, you know, then you start working it away around to it becoming a tradition that nobody would even think of going out and doing that, you know. So it's takes that beginning of understanding to kind of push the rest of it around, I think.
Excellent point, Jeannie. Let's do one thing. I want to elaborate. I want you to elaborate on one thing. Just repeat one thing. So firstly, thank you for your observation on the loop. You know, that is the, like, if there is only one thing that you take away from it, is that it's a loop. And it loops through you in 3 different ways. Loops through other people, all the communities, and the community is just X. It means it loops through your family, it loops through your education institution that you are associated with, it loops through your neighborhood, it loops through your country, it loops through the world as a whole. So there are loops there. It also loops through all the conceptions that you have. So I want to look at it, because the thing is, the terms that I'm using are not important at all. It is a certain kind of thing they're trying to point to. Like, for example, the terms that you offered for Bucky and CJ are fantastic terms. So can you repeat them just one more time for everybody? If you could unmute yourself.
Probably Joe would be able to say the whole phrase, but it's making the world work for 100% of humanity.
Perfect.
And CJ's was his basic idea that what we're here for is to solve humanity's problems.
Yes.
And and that, you know, we might as well accept that as our sort of goal in life. That's what we're meant to do.
Yes.
So
let me go ahead and answer, you know, kind of elaborate on that, because both of them are very, very good capturing of the ideal. Because what the ideal is basically the framework, the intellectual framework that you're using in order for you're here, in order to deliver a lot of value to everybody else. Now, the greatness of both these formulations, that those are both actually universal formulations. What is it that will work for everybody, right? What is it that will work for everybody? Now, so this is like coming up with an action tradition or design tradition for everybody. So it is kind of focused on that. So CJ's, you know, how do you solve the problem? How do you solve the problem? So that's a more kind of an intellectual flavor to it. But all of them are all about, like, look at both the actions of both Bucky and CJ. What did they do? They basically talk to people, okay? A lot of people, not just one group of people, but every group of people. They are individuals. They have their own understanding of things. They speak to them, to people. They develop organizations. They build fellowship amongst people. At the same time, they are presenting, they are engaging their vision. You can talk about this as a vision of the ideal, of saying, this is, guys, this is what is possible. This is what is possible. So it is like, that's what it holds up. And that's why people found Bucky interesting, because they say, oh, he has this vision, he has a solution. So people of very different backgrounds came and say, let's see what we can work together. So thank you, Jeannie. And folks, you can keep coming back and asking, commenting more things and saying more things. Next up is going to be Katie. Katie, go ahead.
Oh, I think I was gonna make a small comment too about community values that might first start out as a family and then later become part of the community. And then regarding what Jyoti was saying, I agree that most people struggle with seeing universal I'm sorry, I forgot a lot of my thought about what I was going to say about I think I was going to say using the traditions to oh yes, now I remember my thought. I was parking this morning and I was laughing to myself because I was thinking about whether people believe in something bigger. And then I was laughing because I was like, well, what if we just assume that we could create something ourselves? Would we even be able to agree how we would want it to be? And I was laughing because I was like, would we want the person to be the God to be all knowing or not all knowing? So I think using these different traditions is to help us. It's kind of a process of discovery, and we never reach full understanding, but we're trying to kind of live in accordance with the Tao. And I think Jeannie's also, I like what Jeannie said too, that it's also something practical for him, that we're here to solve problems.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katie. And the thing that distinguishes these older traditions with modern times is that they thought that there is a reality out there. You can say reality, nature, God, something out there which just is. And you are trying to understand it and act. So there is this back and forth relationship. So you're really having a conversation. I like the model of conversation, okay, because this is conversation between you and others. This is the conversation between you and God, or you and reality. You're saying, Newton is saying, oh, light works like this. It's composed of different colors. And so, okay, if that is so, what will be the result? That you should be able to take it apart and you should be able to put it together. Is that possible? Let me see. So there is a continuous back and forth. When many people kind of give up the idea that there is something real out there, then they say, okay, how can I generate an ideal out of my own head? Okay, now that's not going to work, because the best formulation of this that I've seen is by Louis Sullivan. He, in his autobiography of an idea, he says life began to break in upon the child. He was a child at that time. He says life began to break in upon him. So that idea of life breaking in upon us is basically saying yes to nature, reality, God. And then he says a continuous breaking in from the outside and breaking out from the inside was to shape the destiny. So you can see that it is like breathing in, you're breathing in and you're breathing out. So he's describing this loop with this one and this one. This is simply extension of the same process now in a three-part. It's recognizing that the same thing is happening with other people. And therefore, if you include them in that breathing exercise, you are able to move towards the ideal better. You are able to offer what you have learned to other people. The other people you are able to learn from other people. So it's not just you and nature, it is you, others, and nature working together. Thank you, Katie. Great point. Maritza.
Shrikant, I wanted to talk a little bit about comprehensivity a little more. I mean, it's impossible to talk about it by itself, but just I want to remind people of how we are defining comprehensivity. We're using CJ Fearnley's definition, and its comprehensivity is our ability to comprehend our worlds broadly and deeply. And furthermore, he tells us that it is a facility in questioning, conceptualizing, interpreting, and acting to build a multi-perspectival yet integrated understanding of the world, how it works, and how it changes. Um, the I wanted to put that back out here because I think in some way that helps to provide a view of how we're looking at comprehensivity and why we feel okay using the term ideal. So, you know, um, the the thing here when we're saying ideal, we're not talking about three. I know that she can't mention three, and we sometimes here we tend to pull out the tools that either are fascinating to us right now or that are most understood by ourselves. It's the human nature, but the beauty of this concept of comprehensivity as the ideal, it's that if comprehensivity is the ability to comprehend our worlds broadly and deeply, it's a never-ending process, as I think, Shrikant, you mentioned. So the reason why that is the ideal, it's because we are always striving towards more comprehension, towards a going deeper, going broader. So that's the ideal. The ideal is not the Tao. The ideal is not, Stoicism. It's not Jung. It's not God. It's not any religion or philosophy that you would interject. It's just a tool towards the goal of increased comprehensivity. And so I that's the way I view the use of the word ideal. And it's why I find that I'm okay with, ideal being there, with the understanding that in our modern world, it could tend to mean something different. So I just invite people to consider the ideal being that to which we are constantly striving, and we being Maritza, we being everyone in the room, we being everyone in the city, in the world, in the country, in the world. It is a collective and a singular. And the beauty of, from my perspective, the beauty of this loop is that it reminds us that as we are striving for comprehension more broadly and more deeply, it cannot be done without considering the aspects of understanding. So you reach a point in accumulating knowledge where if you don't pause to integrate and ensure that you're achieving understanding, you can't go deeper until you've done that. So that's part of the iterative loop. And the beauty of that, looking at this model, is if you only collect knowledge without seeking any understanding, you're cheating yourself out of that love aspect, out of that spirit. And you don't have to be a religious person to feel that or to gain it. Anybody, it's that self, like, it's a feeling of like understanding brings I don't know how to describe it, but I think everyone knows what I mean. It's like when you finally get something, you're like, okay, on to the next, because you got it. And that to me is love of self. And also, that's how you make a product. If you are an engineer and you're working towards creating a widget, you have to understand it. Like she can't, you're talking about breaking things apart and putting them back together. That's a form of love. And then when you go on to the next, you have to seek some type of organization, even if organization to you looks disjointed, and maybe I look at your organization and I think, oh my gosh, that's a hot mess. It's still there, and it allows for the loop to continue. And because the work you created exists in the universe now, in the world, others are improved for it. And it's going to continue. And even if the other is you, if that makes sense, because we all interact with others. Like everything you touch touches something else, whether you know it or not. And so the ideal makes us better, even when that's not what we're striving towards. That's why, to me, I'm comfortable with the idea of ideal synonymous with our striving for comprehensivity. Sorry, I just kept rambling. Thank you, Shrikant.
Oh, that was excellent. Wonderful. I agree with everything that you said. I want to just comment on a couple of things. And then I would really, it's very interesting that some people have, have difficulty with the ideal. And maybe we'll talk about it later on. So first thing I want to say is that, whenever you're thinking about this Trinitarian thing, and I completely agree with Maritza that this is really not about religion at all. This is about human beings. This is about human beings living on this earth in a social context, which actually requires ideals. Because what happens is that you can't really, what is it that holds us together, right? If you look at the evolutionary context, it was biology. We were in groups of 30 people. Everybody knew everybody. We needed each other in order to just survive. If we were cast out of that society, you would die. And when it came in contact with another tribes, there was typically a lot of fighting, which was very common, especially when resources were scarce. When you're trying to build something larger than that, you need to have something which you can count on in the other person, even though you do not know them, that even if they're not your family members that you've known since you were born. And that kind of is the origin of development of ideals in written form and various things. The other point I wanted to make is that it's very interesting. It's always the question, is it 3 or is it 1? And the answer is yes. It is 1 in the sense that it is one loop. And everything that Maritza was talking about was pointing to that loop that is going through everything. Because at each of these points, like when you access all the inquiry traditions, it's going to make you broader. It's going to make you more macro comprehensive. When you go ahead and do something in your life, you're going to be exercising that micro incisiveness. You're going to apply everything that you've learned, and you're going to keep doing that again and again and again and again to do that. But excellent comments. Next up is going to be Joe, Rupali, and Jeannie. Joe.
Yeah, so I think that ideal needs to be a little bit more well-defined. And I think about it in terms of, you're talking about universal principles and things along those lines. But I think that where people are maybe having a problem with the idea of an ideal, that every coherent system has axioms, has some principles to them, right? Some may not hold that there's a universal principle, but all of them hold that have principles if it's coherent. So I think that when people are really asking whether or not there is an ideal, and I disagree in the sense that I do think it is about whether this is meaning a God inside of nature or outside of nature. And I think both can believe in principles. Now, I do believe that part. But I think what people are asking is that, is there an order to nature itself? And that's where I think people are blind or confusing the idea of an ideal and what is a principle. Because there are individuals that believe that there are gods within nature or outside of nature, but they still believe in principles. And they still believe in those principles can be held. And virtue is something, one of those examples. They could be, you can be a virtue ethicist. But the question is then, do you believe that there's a natural order to the universe itself?
Yeah, and
And
that
I
is
think that's where people are, I think, getting confused, in the sense that they're saying, what is ideal? Are you talking about God, or are you talking about nature, or are you talking about what? What is X? So it is about religion.
it is, I mean, I think the best way I've seen it again is C.S. Lewis in Abolition of Man. He says we have lost the Tao. So we have lost the idea of nature that somebody like Newton had or Darwin had. We've lost all of those, basically any kind of universal, any kind of principle. So the subjectivists are kind of basically, and once you do that, you're kind of lost. And it's not a question of coming up with some system with axioms, because ultimately it is, you have to say it is, you start with what is. And if you say that there is nothing, then it's going to lead to
Or
lack
you
of
could,
thought, lack of ideals, lack.
you could also say, I don't know. See, this is where we had a very good conversation about this during one of the Gospel of John sessions. And the idea that one of the examples of Stoicism is that it's outside my control. I don't know. I don't have all the information. Therefore, there's an element that I must refrain from actually making certain judgments. That it's, I can only go with the best, you make the best decision possible, but that is one way of looking at it. The other way of saying is it God's will. But you're saying that there is an order, that there's in that particular instance. But there's the other element of, saying that you're uncertain. Still, that's a way of looking at the world that's legitimate.
Thank you, Joe. I mean, I do disagree.
So
basically, like for example, Stoicism, the dichotomy of control, the purpose of dichotomy of control is to sharply distinguish between what is it that you can control, that you're saying, like, this I can control and this I can't control. It is the way, like you're saying, look, what other people do, you can't control. But it is all focused on the universal. It is all
right.
Focused on this. And they are saying, Stoics absolutely hold that there is a universal. And
yes, no, virtue is the only good. I mean, that is the
it's not
system.
So being so uncertainty of saying, that I'm uncertain about things. The other part of it is that,
well, no. I mean, it's saying that you don't have the whole picture. Therefore, you need to rely on this principle. And this principle is the only good thing that we actually have.
I mean, it's slightly different. My understanding of this is quite different from yours. I think what it is that you're trying to identify the principles, and it's a question of life and death. If you don't do that, like it's a creative principle, it's something that keeps life going. If you say, I don't know about that, you have it's like, how are you going to live? What are you going to do? You can say, I don't know about many things, most things. So, but you have to have that dichotomy of control of saying, look, this I can control and I should control and I will control.
But I do know virtue is the only good. That's a Stoic approach. But that's an axiom within a system.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. I mean, we think differently about these things, and that's perfectly okay.
That's fine. That's good. That's the point of comprehensivity.
Yes, we think differently because let me go to the next one. Rupali followed by, let me see who else is there. Rupali followed by Jeannie.
Thank you, Shrikant. I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Maritza was saying. And I come from an educational background. I work with children. Particularly, I work with the Montessori philosophy. And I also have a background in architecture. So I'm going to just talk from those two perspectives. So one of the things that we see is humans aspire to do something positive in their lives. And they are always seeking to get to a goal. And that goal we can call as an idea. And I'll give you an example in education. I work with children, first grade through preschool through 8th grade. And a first grader learns cursive very easily. They love it. They like it. They look at, because it's a Montessori classroom, it's a mixed age group, they look at the older students and they see these long essays written in beautiful penmanship. And nobody forces them to write in cursive. On their own, overnight, children begin to write in cursive because they aspire, they have that aspiration to do well, to do better. And by the time they come to 3rd grade and 4th grade, they're looking at calligraphy from various cultures. And they say, wow, this is beautiful. I want to try it. For example, this year we are studying Asia. And they're looking at calligraphy from Asian countries. Another year when we study Europe, they look at medieval calligraphy and they make these beautiful letters, cards written in beautiful penmanship. Again, no one is forcing them. It's coming from their own desire. And what Maria Montessori discovered about children when she worked with children in Europe, in Asia, in the US, that it doesn't matter which geographical location you're in. It doesn't matter which time period you're in. Humans have the desire and the qualities to push themselves, to do better, to do good, to do something constructive. And those aspirations lie within us. We don't have qualities like lions and bears or cactus that grows in the desert to protect themselves. What we have are our ability to think, to work, to create, to imagine. So how can we maximize these skills that we have to think, to work, to create? We can see throughout history, throughout human evolution, that humans have achieved these highest levels in art or music or architecture. If you look at our local level, we can say, look at people in your family. Some of them have mastered the art of cooking or sewing, and they do it with such, when you look at them, it almost seems effortless, but they've put in a lot of effort to get to that point. And they've worked towards that ideal that I want to be as good as this. So when you achieve these certain levels, like say cursive or cooking or sewing, you go on to the next, I'm going to build a building. Wow, okay, I'm going to build a civilization. I'm going to, collectively, we are going to build a civilization, and so on and so forth. Collectively, we are going to look at our Earth, like Buckminster Fuller said, this is our spaceship Earth. We have to take care of it. And where do these aspirations come from? They come from nature. Nature has given us those aspirations. And Shrikant is talking about the Bible, the Tao, and the Bhagavad Gita. These texts have tried to understand this nature of human beings, that, what nature has given us and how we can maximize it. And he's calling that the ideal, right? Or is giving that as an example of an ideal. But we don't need to refer to just those three texts. It's not about religion. You can look at Buckminster Fuller and what he talks about. You can look at Louis Sullivan's texts and he talks about, maybe you read Walt Whitman's poems or Rabindranath Tagore's poems. You could read Maria Montessori's writings on what does it mean to be a human being. They all come back to the qualities that we possess as human beings and how we can work towards maximizing that quality, that those aspirations that we have. And what my understanding about ideal is that goal, that ideal, that we can be better individually, we can be better collectively while we have this time on earth together. And to understand that, to be able to take it all in, we need to have an approach that integrates various disciplines, because you cannot understand the whole without understanding all the parts that go into it. Thank you.
Wonderful, Rupali. That was beautiful. I think you talked about this better than I did, about the ideal and kind of role of it in human life. And I think it looks like there is a lot of thoughts people have about it. I'm completely sold on this idea of ideals. So I'm just so I invite people to kind of ask questions, and we can I'm happy to discuss that as much as people want. And I think I do want to kind of go into it more detail, because that's really it's a like Jordan Peterson calls it the meaning crisis. So you go, what is the meaning? What is the meaning of your life? What is it that really motivates you on a sustained basis? What is it that you're driving for? These kind of questions. So I would love to have more discussions, more discussion on this. So feel free to bring up anything that you see worthwhile. So let's go with Jeannie, Mike, and Maritza. Jeannie.
I just wanted to make a couple comments on what you said, Joe. Virtue is the only good. What about nature? Because nature isn't really virtue, but nature is good. I mean, I think that is part of it. It also is possible to think that the whole thing is just chaos. There's no principles, and that there's no meaning to life, and there's no reason to do anything at all. But even if you feel that way, it's possible to take the as if approach, where you take a tradition, and we are all part of many traditions. You're already in that purple place up there. As soon as you're born, you're already in a bunch of traditions. So you can take those traditions and just live with them. That's a tradition that you're in, or you can, begin to explore others. But the real thing I wanted to talk about was the purple is like the egghead person. That's like myself. You're studying these things, you're trying to understand them, and you're trying to understand the community's values, but you're separate from the actions. And the actions, you actually need some kind of momentum to throw yourself out of that little purple circle into the larger circles. And that's where you're really going to have an effect. And I was thinking, like, how doing a community mural, which is that's the style, you don't just do your own mural anymore. So, that brings that yellow expression thing with the fellowship of the community, and how these things, the more you can join the things that you're doing in that little loop. I mean, you might just stay there and do your little work and have your, love. You might stay in your own little space, but the more you can launch yourself into the other spaces, and join them together, then you're going to have a sort of richer experience, I think.
Excellent point. This is such an incredible conversation. So absolutely, I think people have kind of predilections of focusing on one of these colors. It's like typically one kind of primary thing, like inquiry or action or expression. It doesn't mean that they can't do the other things, but they kind of lead themselves, lead with that. And what happens is that all of these three are intimately connected because there are these loops that are running. Not only that you have to go through the loop, but these loops are actually running, impacting. Like when somebody builds an organization, builds a city, for example, or a certain, let's say, a concert hall, you enter it, you will have an emotional experience in reaction to that. And that's very real. So there are these loops running across the board. Go ahead, Jeannie.
I wanted to add that there's also a drawing in. So if you start like, say your children up with the expression part, and then they're drawn into understanding the other stuff. So you can actually start at the periphery and draw inward as well.
Exactly. I mean, the example that Rupali was giving of a Montessori classroom, where one person is, they're younger, but this applies to even people who are not particularly good at doing cursive. They look at this other person doing cursive and say, hey, maybe I can do it a little bit better. And then they start, use that as an inspiration. The other person will show them many times. The other kid will come and say, you know what, this is what you do. You need to hold you put your hand, it should be like this. And so you will actually learn from each other when you actually, interact. And the Montessori classroom is a very good example for another reason. It's like, it's an open classroom with people, not just, kids, not just sitting immobile, looking at the teacher and just depending on this one source to give them knowledge. This is a very passive way of thinking. And it's also a very odd kind of a social way of thinking, because it actually breaks. That's not how human beings are. The way in which Montessori classrooms are is there is this large room. Everything is on the side. The middle part of the room is completely empty. And kids can bring their mats and bring whatever it is that they want to work from the edge and work either individually or together on it. They watch each other work. So this is actually, the Montessori classroom is a very good example of all these loops happening in real time with people. And so the kind of elaborating on it, there are people who are kind of more action oriented. And if they actually talk a little bit more to people who are more kind of idea oriented, maybe they can learn something from them. They can improve their own actions, the things that they care about. People who are expressive can learn from the other two. Also, if you're, for example, expressive, you're creating art of your own, dealing with other artists. So it's like the other people have so much to offer. Learning from all the artistic traditions that are there. There is so much to offer. So it's not just like this one area. It is all the yellows. And then if you are in this yellow, the other parts, other colors as well. So great point. Thank you. Thank you, Jeannie. Next up is Mike, followed by Maritza. Mike C.
Great. Yeah, this was from a little while ago, but it was related to kind of putting it into the universe. And until it has to be actualized into the universe. So only until it's actualized. So it can be in thought. You can think of certain things. It doesn't really play a role, maybe a slight, or really not really at all. So the actions that are thought have to be done within the physical reality and played out. And I thought there was a key in one of Hegel's readings about habit, how habit, like when you have certain habits, whether it's exercising or just picking up a book for 2 minutes a day, you start to actualize those things that you want to see in the world. So the habits are a good way to actualize and like kind of carve what your thoughts are into reality. And sometimes it doesn't play out as you think. So you think something's going to play out a certain way. When you play it out to reality, it doesn't work. So you learn from your physical reality. You go back to the drawing board and try to tinker with your, habit until it's actualized, kind of how it works within reality. So yeah, just that kind of point was, some insight from you a while back, something else I was reading. And then also about kind of like, I thought about kind of like your own self within a society is almost like a fern. So, it's like one stem that finds its own, it kind of goes up its own path, but it's still part of like the whole and all of the other stems that go up. And what it is it's related to the otherness in relation to the other stems. So, it doesn't know what itself is, but only in relation to the whole of what it is, which is kind of like, you are your own self with your own individualism, but also like simultaneously, paradoxically, you are part of a system as well. You can't hold on to one or the other. It's both. That's it. Thanks.
Excellent. Both points, amazing points. Thank you. So first thing I want to say is that, like, for example, if you try to come up with a solution just by one thing, doesn't work. Like, for example, cognitive behavioral therapy is all about what Mike was talking about, is that saying, look, if you think something is right, just build it into a habit. And then slowly your emotions with respect to that will change over time. So you're actually using the understanding, this loop. So it's not just loop across these. So there is a loops like this that are going within it. And you use those loops. Like if you never change your habits and expect your emotions to change just by thinking, not going to happen. So similar, so there is all of this, this loop that is taking place. The second point, Mike, what was your second point? If you want to just tell me what it is, just remind me what it is. Forgot to write it down.
I think it was like, people
I
are just
got
talking about like how to find their own selves
Yes.
within like, like who am I and what am I supposed to be doing? How do I know my own voice? And it was through othering.
Yes.
Kind of like that's how we all make relations, is othering. Like we understand our reality through the differences between everything. So when we are in a society, we don't really know who we are, but when we walk into the real world, we look around us and we kind of see how it plays out, kind of like a fern. And my example was just like the fern. One stem kind of goes in its own direction and kind of is led in a sense by othering between the other stems that are in relation to itself, and it's a whole system.
Beautiful point. Okay, so let me elaborate on it. The first point that Mike was making is how these, within you, how each of these things can build on one another, that you need to actually change your habits in order to change your feelings. So there is a loop going on here. Here in the second point, he's saying that, you're not just developing this way internally, you're actually developing through the loops that are going across people. It's you get a better perspective on your own understanding if you talk to other people about what you understand. And you know, what you don't know, what you agree, what you disagree. You get a much more nuanced view of that. If you are working with other people, you will have a better grasp of what you're really good at in terms of work, and what you can improve on. There is a lot to learn. So in terms of your strengths and weaknesses, it allows you to kind of identify your weaknesses better and your strengths better by, as Mike was saying, othering, by relating to the other person. And if you're honest about it, that gives you an opportunity of fixing your weaknesses by multiple ways. One of my favorite things is from Ray Dalio. It's like when you identify that there is a weakness, there are 4 things you can do. 1, you can ignore it, which is the worst thing to do. You can evade it. Okay, no, I don't have any weakness. Okay. But if you decide that, okay, look, I'm going to face it, there are 3 parts. One part of it is that you can work with other people where they are strong. And I think that's really the heart of the whole thing. The second one is you can improve a little bit. And third one is you can make arrangements with other people so that these weaknesses that you have don't affect you as much. But note that the other 2 parts are done best by starting to work with people who are very, very good at what you're weak at, because then you will be able to scale up, because like otherwise you will get twice as good, but you may still be moving from 1% to 2%, and you will never know it. It's by being open to the other people and all the things that, all the magnificent things that all other people around you are capable of doing and are actually doing, that you learn. There is no way to grow without this part. So thank you, Mike. Great points. Next up is Maritza.
So I had to share with you guys a kind of spastic monologue I had with myself a little bit ago. So when I when Joe mentioned, it's about religion, in my brain I said, no, it's not. And then my brain said, yes, it is. And I was like, no, it's not, but it is. And so I wanted to share that with you guys because I think that's actually the point, is that the ideal is what you are looking at, striving towards in that moment. So if my focus today is on striving towards a better understanding of Stoicism, then my ideal would be the Stoic definition of virtue. If today my ideal is, getting a better understanding of, a mathematical concept, then my ideal is going to look vastly different. And this is a little cheeky, but somebody put in the chat, the definition of virtue is one that considers good. Well, I say, what if whatever one considers good is our virtue? So if today my good is, well, okay, my good today is surveys, right? So I'm learning about research surveys. So if I'm striving to be the best, to learn how to create the best research surveys, then the ideal for me is, I don't know, it's whatever, multifaceted survey with the most responses I can find. And so once I've identified that as my ideal today, I have to acknowledge that ideal that's not going to help me when I go back to studying Stoicism. The ideal for, research methods is going to do nothing for me when I'm studying philosophy. And so then it's about dancing or being light-footed. We as humans should always be dancing. Your ideal is going to shift and change many times, not just in your lifetime, but maybe even throughout the day. Like if we're embracing the fact that multiple perspectives help enhance something, the example about the children learning calligraphy. So the children could communicate just fine writing standard written words. They saw something that to their mind looked either different or better or more enticing. It might just be that it was new. And so it was desirous to them in that moment because it was new and they sought to learn it. But one of the most beautiful things I've heard CJ talk about when speaking of comprehensivity is, it's a very simple concept. It's the concept that if we focus on only one thing and we get really good at that one thing, that's great. You have a really sharp and really well-honed toolbox. Amazing. When you're trying to do problem solving, you have a really good toolbox. But what happens when you have a problem and none of those tools work? You have nothing else to reach for. The beauty of comprehensivity and constant striving is that you have a varied set of tools. And so when you are trying to solve a problem and the tool that you're used to grabbing doesn't work, you have others you can select from. And in this model, I see stacks upon stacks of this loop. It's not one loop, it's infinity numbers, and turn on their side, spiraling. Because the idea is to never get stuck on one loop. You want to hop in between because that's how we're the richer for it. And so anyway, yeah, sorry, Shrikant, that was the idea. Like, I couldn't decide if I agreed or disagreed with some of the things that folks were saying. And I decided that ultimately, I do agree with them all. I just don't agree that any of them are the answer. I think they all are the answer at some slice. That makes
Excellent,
sense.
excellent point, Maritza. So Maritza, what I've noticed is that nobody has any issue with this part. Okay, nobody has any issue with this part. Nobody has any issue with the interaction between these parts. So all the questions and issues are really focused on the ideal. So what I want to do, folks, is I want to ask each of you this question. Okay, don't talk about ideals in general. The simple question is, do you have ideals? Okay, do you have ideals? And then just talk about it. You can say, yes, I have ideals, and this is what they are. This is how I don't talk about ideals in general for human beings. I'm saying, because all of this is about skin in the game. This is about your life. This is about you living. That's what this whole diagram is about. So it's not about saying, oh, this person might say this about ideals, that person. Let's keep that aside for a moment, okay? And just ask the questions, but just try to answer the question, do you have an ideal or ideals, and how do you think of them? Let's go with Peter first and then Joe. Peter, go ahead. You've not spoken before.
Okay, do I have ideals? Yes, I do.
Yes, go ahead.
What do those ideals look like? Well, as I think, if you think of the example of the frog trying to jump across the road, we know about that he can jump half of the distance and then half of the distance again and then keep going half. And for the mathematicians amongst us will rapidly realize the frog never gets to the other side of the road. So I think ideals for me are quite often those things. They're off in the distance and I can approach them and try to emulate them. I think they exist. I think they're worth reaching out for. I think they're motivators, and I think they're good things for good.
Thank you, Peter. Joe, do you have ideals?
I do. And how do I practice them? I mean, there's a lot of different ways, but I think self-evaluation, knowing thyself, is the most important part of that. Because then you're constantly striving. You also realize that there's an inherent bias that's built into us, and myself included. So that bias actually has a way of actually impacting how I interact with others. So by asking myself whether I've been just to someone, and whether I've been demonstrated courage in particular situations, and it would have been wise. I think that those are important questions. So it's an inquiry not only to the traditions, but to the individual themselves. I just have to make one statement. I do think that on my previous comment, I know Mike had said something about universe not mattering, but I do think metaphysics matters, and how we interact with the world. And I do think that does have a distinct impact on our habits, and how what we determine what is good or bad.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else wants to talk about, how they personally see ideals? Is it, do you have ideals? How do you think of them? What are they? What function do they serve? Go ahead. Jeannie.
I did things in the wrong order. I think one ideal, I think pretty much everybody can agree with, but I hope, is that you know, the needs of human beings are met. So when I, you know, go to eat my dinner and I know those people are, you know, starving, and you know, it turns to dust. It's hard. You know, I don't want other people to not be able to eat. And I think, you know, looking into the future, I think of like the you know, future generations, you know, grandchildren of my friends and, you know, great grandchildren. And I think I want those people to be able to, you know, have a rich life and to be able to go out in nature and breathe in the air, you know, to go to the beach and go swimming in the ocean or maybe down a river. You know, I hope the rivers will become cleaner and we can swim, you know, more places. But those kind of ideals, I think, I hope they're universal, but you know, that the needs of human beings be met.
Thank you, Jeannie. All right, folks, would love to hear from you. How do you, you know, do you have ideals, and how do you think of your ideals? You know, what are your ideals? Would you like to talk about them? Would love to hear, because see, this is the only way we can talk about it, because, you know, this is not a theoretical discussion. You know, this is of tremendous, you know, practical importance, and you really need to address this. So go ahead. Next up is going to be Katie. Katie.
I agree with Joe's comment about self-reflection. I always catch myself going, you know, is there intention to connect when I'm doing something? And if I tell myself, nope, I just want to just tell somebody what I think about something and I don't want to listen to them, then I don't let myself even say anything. And another idea would be that people anywhere would be able to get the help that they need to do something. And it's not that people won't make mistakes. Even in any of our systems, people are very prone to making mistakes, but how we deal with those problems is the biggest problem, not that we're making mistakes.
Thank you, Katie. Anybody else wants to share? So I'm going to share, but would love to hear anybody else. For me, like if I have to kind of narrow it down, I mean, the thing that I'm most focused on, the thing that I care most about, that I'm focused on continuously, is definitely in this area, and that is, you know, I call it the creative principle, you know, of what is the principle of creation? What is the principle of creation of new things? Because it is all about, you know, creativity and the principle underlying that can be, as you can think of it as a set of principles if you want, but it is about rejuvenation. No matter where you are on any of these things, what will take you to the next level? What principle do you need to keep using relentlessly all the time in order for you to keep growing, or keep, you know, creating new things within yourself, within the community, within this part. So what do you need to do? So that's kind of that's my ideal. Jyoti, do you have an ideal, and what if so, what is it? Jyoti, you need to unmute. All right.
Hold on one second. Okay, I got it. So I'm going to go with kind of this fuzzy idea of ideal that I've gotten. I would say that I would hope to approach every situation with curiosity rather than a set, already a premise of how I'm going to feel or conclude about this. Rather, just step into situations with an open mind and being curious about what's what's possible and what's going on, and being able to hear people without having reactivity or being defensive. That to me feels like a real conversation or reality.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. Next up is Judy. Judy, do you have an ideal? And if so, what is it? Judy, you're on mute.
Okay, I have a problem with ideals because I feel that ideals are like searching for perfection, and that's one of my non-ideals.
Let me phrase it. Maybe it's a terminology. What is it that you're seeking? What is it that you're seeking?
Yeah, I think the seeking for me is ongoing. It's not just, oh, I'm going to seek this and then I'm going to get it and I'm going to get there. I'm always like ongoing. I think that's my ideal, to keep moving, to continuous process improvement, let's say. That's one of my ideals. Another one of my ideals is self-discovery and discovery of the world and the things and the people and the thoughts. It's like a constant, somebody mentioned curiosity. Yes, that's it. Curiosity, wonder, awe, that's another one of my ideals. But I don't want to use the word ideal too much because I feel that it's encapsulated in something or concretized in something that is, okay, you got it, and then now you're standing at this pillar of self-righteousness. So I fear a little bit I feel a little bit of when people talk about, this is what I believe in, this is it. And because I feel that they're very fundamentalist in a certain sense. They don't really know what they're talking about, because how can they generalize and how can they be at one with just one ideal or whatever, or think that everybody's going to have their ideal. So I rather kind of like prefer to kind of split the word ideal in something that is like ongoing ideals, moving towards ideals, but not necessarily getting there, just working at it.
No, very good. I mean, that's what the concept of ideal means to me. It is that towards which you are going, and it is an ongoing process because it's something that is motivating you all the time to move forward. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And you clearly have ideals in my book. Okay, that whatever you've described, those in my concept of ideal, that is exactly what it is. So excellent. Thank you. Next up is going to be Maritza.
For me, honestly, something that I strive towards is actually increased objectivity. I understand that we are emotional, subjective creatures, but I do strive towards not allowing that to be my first foot forward in a situation. So ideal to me is to move forward with objectivity.
Thank you. Maritza, somebody is on unmute. Can you mute them so that there is no okay, very good. Thank you. All right. Anybody else wants to share? So I really liked people talking about the ideal, because I think it is indispensable. That's because otherwise, so I really like, because this is a much more it's wonderful to hear how people think about it. So all right, now anybody else wants to add anything? Jeannie, go ahead. Jeannie, go ahead. You're on mute.
Sorry, I was in another window somewhere. I think, what was I going to say here about the ideal? I think part of the fear is that, okay, so, somebody may enjoy hunting swans and they may be eventually denied that privilege. And maybe that's required for our protection of, the environment and nature and so forth. So I think people are afraid that the ideal means that we all are going to be, crammed into this little box of we can only do this and that and not express ourselves in a free way. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is one of the needs of humans is to be free. So I mean, you're okay. So, I'm going for everybody should have food and everybody should have housing and so forth. But everybody needs a degree of freedom in order to have an ideal expressed in our society. So I think it's making us fearful that we're going to be restricted. And actually, it should be a door opening to a freedom that everybody should have, actually. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, freedom is definitely one of them. All right. So this was a very good conversation. Enjoyed it a great deal. Thank you, folks, for the participation. I want to tell you about what is coming up next. Let's see here. Tomorrow we've got Power of Myth, that Brian, Penny, and Evanique are doing. Friday, I don't know what we planned yet. Let's see. I might do something on Friday. On Saturday, we have Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We've got Asian Philosophies. On Sunday, this Sunday, we used to, let me see if we have this. We've got on alternate Sundays. This is this Sunday, right? We've got the plays.
Right. Yeah, it's a Sunday.
Yeah, so it is Ibsen, Doll's House. It's an amazing play. If you're not experienced Ibsen, it is about, this is like 19th century. First time we're talking about, dramatizing the power capability that women have. So it's a monumental play. So if you're not familiar with Ibsen, this is your chance to find out. And Phil does such an amazing job of it. On Mondays, we have collaborative poetry. On Tuesdays, we're doing Tao Te Ching. And next Wednesdays, we continue this series of CJ. And the next one is going to be the necessity and impossibility, right, Maritza? Yeah, necessity and impossibility of comprehensivism. And I want to remind you folks, we really want to hear from you. So you're welcome to make any presentation on any topic connected to the topic that we are discussing for 5 minutes. And you don't even have to tell me in advance. You can just show up and I will ask who wants to present and we'll go ahead and present. The format there is you read the essay and think about it. You can follow some of the links if you want and come prepared to first talk about what you got from the essay for about 2 minutes. Then we'll have a series of presentations and then we'll have a general discussion. So I'm really delighted how this is coming along. So thank you very much, everybody. And Jeannie, as soon as we disconnect, can you come back into the same Zoom link? I want to talk to you about the book. All right, thanks. Bye.